Here we sit, each man alone in the dark. These men around me were the best friends I will ever know. I wondered how many men would die before the sun came up. Lord, I pray, please let me do everything right. Don't let me get anybody killed, and don't let me get killed either. I really think I'm too young for this. So those were the words of a young American paratrooper sitting in an aeroplane flying across the Channel to France on the night of the 6th of June 1944. Welcome to Time Tunnelers. I'm Robin Scott-Elliot, and I'm going to tell you the story of one of the most important dates of the Second World War and one of the most important dates in our history, the 6th of June 1944, D-Day and the invasion of France, because this is the time when we are marking the 80th anniversary of this really important date and the men and women who took part in it. So we have to begin by going back 4 years to 1940 when the Germans invaded Holland, Belgium and France, and this begins 4 years of a really brutal occupation. But by 1944 the tide is turning. In the east, the Soviets, the Russians are advancing. In the south, the British and the Americans are coming up through Italy. And in the west, everyone knows the invasion is coming. And when it comes, this is going to be an absolutely pivotal moment in the Second World War. Who's going to win? If it succeeds, this will be the beginning of the end. If it fails, well, that doesn't even bear thinking about. So the man in charge was called General Dwight D. Eisenhower. He's an American who later became the President of America. And he decided that every detail had to be known before they could decide whether they were going to land. So they even put adverts in papers in Britain and on the radio, asking people to send in holiday photos or any postcards they had from France, so all the planners could pore over it and decide where they were going to land, what the best place was to land. So they chose Normandy in the northwest of France, which had really good beaches. And they didn't want to leave any stone unturned in planning this. So at night, they would send divers crawling onto the beach to bring back buckets of sand that were then taken back to Britain and analysed to check that they were strong enough for tanks to drive on them. You know, inland, the men, women and children of the French resistance were collecting any information they could about the German defences and radioing them back to London. And there were children as young as 14 taking part in this, and it was really, really dangerous, because if you were caught, you would either be shot or sent to a concentration camp. So this was a life or death struggle. So they came up with a plan, and it was called Operation Overlord. And the plan was to land on 5 beaches along the Normandy coast. 2 would be American, Omaha and Utah. So these are the code words that were given to the beaches. And then 3, Gold, Juno and Sword, would be the beaches where the British and Canadian and some French forces landed. And ahead of them inland, British and American paratroopers like that young man I spoke about at the start would jump out their planes in the middle of the night and capture bridges and other landmarks to help when it came for advancing inland. So when the Germans woke up on the 6th of June, they had no idea what was coming. They were taken completely by surprise as they looked out of their bunkers and their defences along these beaches and saw the sea black with ships. There were more than 6,000 ships carrying 160,000 men. And as dawn came, these battleships opened fire on the German defences. And among them was a ship called HMS Belfast. Now today, HMS Belfast is a floating museum and it's moored near Tower Bridge on the River Thames in London. So if you live in London or you're on a trip to London, that is well worth a visit. It's a brilliant museum. So at 6:30 the landings begin, and the men scramble down nettings on the side of the battleships on really rough sea and drop into these smaller ships called landing craft, which take them into the beach. Now here's my writing challenge to you. I'm going to give it to you now because I want you to imagine that you're one of these young British or American or Canadian or French men on these landing craft heading into battle. It'll be the first time you've ever been in battle in your life. It might even be the first time you've been away from home in your life. You're 18, 19, 20, you're probably seasick, you're certainly scared. So I want you to write a little diary of what was going through their minds as they headed inland with these men around them who have become the best friends they will ever have. Suddenly, you reach land the landing craft ramp crashes down into the sea and you have to run off in all your kit. So you're wearing a full backpack, you've got a helmet on, you've got a water bottle, you've got ammunition, you've got a rifle. Some men were even carrying bicycles. And they plunge into the sea. In some places, the sea came up to your ankle, which is fine. In other places, it came up to your shoulders or even over your head. You have to get into the beach, you're being fired on. In some beaches, it all went fine. But on other beaches like Omaha, where the Americans landed, hundreds and hundreds of young Americans were killed or wounded. But by the time the sun set on the 6th of June 1944, the end of the longest day, the invasion had been a success, and the battle for France now began. So in August 1944, so a couple of months later, Paris, the capital of France, was liberated, and then on the 8th of May 1945, so 11 months after the men landed in Normandy, the Germans surrendered and the war in Europe was over. But this came at a huge cost. On D-Day alone, about 13,000 soldiers were killed and many, many thousands more were wounded. And for the French men, women and children who lived in Normandy, there was a really high cost as well. So during the Battle of Normandy, about 20,000 civilians were killed as their homes and towns and villages were fought over. So as we mark the 80th anniversary of this really important day in history, I think it's really important that we remember those who went and fought for our freedoms there, men, women who planned it, and those who died there. Because history, our history, is really important. History matters, and we should remember it and the men and women who took part in it. Thanks for watching Time Tunnelers.